Hi everyone, welcome back to the fifth week of Computer Science 422. This video lecture series is going to be on safety in UI design. And again, this is the week 5, day 1 for Monday, and the first video in the lecture series. Let's start with a little bit of housekeeping and some reminders before we get started. RDS2 is due this Friday, the 25th. By 11:59 p.m. And as a reminder, that should cover modules 2.1 through 2.4. You'll need 4 comments across all 4 of those readings, and then you also need the 4 in-class assignments, including the one from today. GR1 is going to be due a week from today on Monday the 28th. There's some examples on Piazza, and I'll talk a little more detail about that on Wednesday. And PS1 is also due on Monday the 28th. That is going to be something that I'll review a bit today for you. So for PS1, let's talk about this in terms of a template. Most people I've talked to so far about this have really overthought the amount of work that they need to put into it. It's actually relatively simple. So I kind of laid this out as a template you can use. Remember, you need one interface that you consider good and one interface you consider bad, but neither of them have to be perfectly good or perfectly bad. What you're going to do is first introduce that interface in a really simple way. A sentence that tells me the interface is, and then tell me the name and a basic description. For example, maybe your UI that you're looking at is Amazon's AWS services. So you'd say the interface is Amazon AWS. It provides a suite of web tools for developers. Then you give me the purpose. The purpose of this interface is to provide a suite of web tools for developers to be able to use across a variety of platforms and environments. That's probably enough. Then tell me who it's intended for use by. Who are the intended target audience of this? Many people gravitate towards age, but in many UIs, age actually isn't an intended criteria here. It's more often about expertise or what type of activity these people engage in. So for Amazon AWS, you might say the interface is intended for use by web developers who want to use AI and automation tools in their design. That's really all you need to do to introduce it. Just something really, really short. Don't give me all sorts of history lessons or anything like that. I mean, those are great, but you only get 250 words for each of these UIs, so you got to be very succinct in what you're doing here. So then you're just going to jump into 3 basic evaluations. One of its learnability, one of its efficiency, and one for safety. And not all the learnability and safety and efficiency things, but just one of each. So, for example, you might say, in terms of learnability, to make it really clear that's what you're talking about, the interface does this. So point out something in the interface that you think promotes or inhibits learnability. And then explain and relate that to a specific concept we talked about from class. I'm going to go through that list of those concepts in a little bit here, but for example, you might say that the learnability issue here relates to the design recommendation of using recall instead of recognition to promote learnability. That's something we specifically talked about in class. So then, once you do learnability, and you can see that's a really short little bit about learnability, then you need to talk about one element of efficiency. So, in terms of efficiency, the interface does this, whatever. And that's how you describe the specifics of the interface, but then again, relate it back to the ideas and principles we talked about in class. So you'd say, this relates to the principle of blank. And again, specific from class. I didn't include safety on here. Safety will be coming up in today's video lecture, so you'll see those sort of things. But again, I just really want to emphasize how relatively straightforward this is, so don't overthink it. The additional thing I don't have listed here, but you do need for credit, is to make sure you have an image, some sort of screen cap or image for both of the UIs. Those should both have a caption, and they should both be referenced within the structure of your narrative here. So the easiest place would be to just put it in this first line. The interface is named Amazon AWS, and it does these things. See figure 1. You just need to make sure you actually reference it. No figure should just be kind of thrown in there. Okay? That's it. So what specific concepts we've talked about, I thought I'd give you a recap of those. It was kind of good for me to actually remind myself exactly what I've said too. So far we've talked about learnability and efficiency. In terms of learnability, here are the designs and ideas and concepts we've talked about in terms of learnability. First, and again, what you can use these for is to describe the specific way that the UI either promotes learnability or inhibits learnability by either adhering to these principles or going against them. Okay? So the first one we can talk about is learning by doing, so that the UI should communicate how to use it and allow the user to achieve a goal while also learning to use the system at the same time. That when you provide help, that help should always be searchable and goal-oriented rather than sort of random pop-ups of stuff. That metaphors can be used to improve learnability, where we match the interface actions to a real-world analog. Something here, though, that you can note is that just any old metaphor isn't necessarily good, right? We talked about this in class, that if you have a really great metaphor, it helps learn, but a bad metaphor actually makes it worse. So metaphors is another specific thing you can relate to. You might also point out the interaction style and if that's appropriate for the type of user that you expect here. So a command line is much more suited to an expert user, where direct manipulation is going to be a little bit better for an infrequent or novice user. You could also dive into specifics about the learnability of the interaction style. So if they do use a command line, is there self-disclosure? That's one way to promote learnability of command line user interfaces. And then for direct manipulation, does it use a continuous version of that direct manipulation? In other words, do you see, if you move an icon, if you drag it, does it actually drag continually across the screen? Is it reversible? Can you put it back to where it was? Resizing, those kind of things. So those are all ways that you can describe the learnability aspects of the UI you evaluate and really ground it in what we've talked about in our lectures. Okay? For efficiency, same thing. There's things that we specifically brought in class that I really want to make sure that these are the things you're highlighting and relating your evaluation to. So for efficiency, one major thing we talked about is chunking, and that if you see that the UI is organizing things by commonality, that's a good use of chunking. And to go a little bit deeper, you might also think about how big of a chunk that they're making. So if they pile a dozen different features under one little icon menu, that's probably good for an expert who can chunk all those things into that one menu item. But for a novice, that's actually probably very difficult. So you might actually say this efficiency is problematic because while they do organize them by commonality, they make too big of a chunk. That would be a really great evaluation of UI. We also can talk about short distances and large targets that both fit under our understanding of how people work based on Fitts' law. You can't just say they did Fitts' law, because you can't do Fitts' law, but you can do things according to Fitts' law. So what I'd love for people to say is that the UI is designed efficiently because they make short distances between the buttons that are most commonly used in the UI. And that's a good thing because according to Fitts' law, that reduces reducing the distance reduces time. Don't just say Fitts' law. That's just kind of throwing out the term that's sort of vaguely associated with it. You need to say why Fitts' law and how Fitts' law is applied here. Because you can also apply Fitts' law in this way. Large targets. Fitts' law says that increasing the target size can reduce time. So a UI can make it more efficient by making common elements or common buttons larger, because according to Fitts' law, that can reduce time. Okay? Don't just say because of Fitts' law. The last thing from Fitts' law, too, that you can talk about is steering. We also know that changing direction increases time. So making the things that you're going to use commonly all in one straight line, that's also probably a good efficiency move. And you can attribute that to characteristics from Fitts' law. But again, describe steering, large target, short distances. That's the specific thing we're talking about. And then the last thing we talked about in efficiency is for shortcuts. That if you see some evidence that they're using shortcuts in the UI, that's another way to increase the efficiency for your user. And again, you can be specific about that here. So if you need more details about any of these design issues that we've talked about for efficiency or learnability, go back to those lectures and the videos for those lectures to go into depth on them. We tackled a lot of real complexity there. But that's sort of the real rundown of them, and use those for your PS1s coming up. So hopefully that gives you some insights into what we expect for PS1, but please drop some messages into Piazza asking some questions. And then I'm also available for office hours today. Mondays from 3 to 4, I'm there, whether or not you are. And I love talking with students there. So bring your ideas, bring PS1, bring GR1. I'm happy to talk those through with anybody. And again, let me know how I can help. So in the next video, we'll jump into safety. and talk about that as our third dimension of usability we'll be evaluating throughout the course. And I will see you over there. Thanks.